story in the Daily Caller today. Illegal alien arrested 4 times in 2 years, allegedly beat California woman with hammer and raped her. She died, by the way. We should point that out. The victim, Marilyn Ferris, died 8 days after the attack, which occurred July 24 while she was asleep in her Santa Maria home. An autopsy is being conducted to help determine if Ferris died as a direct result of the heinous crime. Victor Oriolano Martinez Ramirez, 29, was arrested shortly after the attack while he was inside another home nearby, apparently which did not belong to him. He is charged with attempted murder, first-degree burglary with person present, assault with intent to commit rape, sexual penetration by foreign object, and resisting a peace officer, according to the Santa Maria Times. His bond is set at $1 million. He's been arrested 4 times over the past 2 years for narcotics violations. That means he's a drug runner. Santa Maria Police Chief Ralph Martin said Tuesday that Immigrations and Custom Enforcement verified that he was in the U.S. illegally. Yep. Maybe Donald Trump is right to some extent. Could we speculate on that? Some of the people coming here are just, or maybe culturally they just never can adjust. I think those are fair questions to ask. I do want to mention quickly, on a lighter note, we've had some weather the last few days that has been hot, and we'll probably still have some more hot weather before the end of the year. And that means if you're sitting next to that window in your home office or when you're driving, you're in that convection oven that's created by that glass. And we recommend, if you'd like to reduce the heat, you can do that by up to 72% by getting window tints. Give the good folks at Tint Lady of Idaho a call, and you'll save on your air conditioning, and that means electric bills too at home or office. Free estimates you can call today, 736-8469. They're online at tintladyofidaho.com, locally owned and operated, over 20 years experience. The shop is at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, open today, Monday through Friday, in fact, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only, and they remind you, don't squint, get tint. We have a telephone caller joining us coming up on 936-69 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. What's on your mind?
Bill, that last caller, I thought maybe he'd move back across the border. But, he's so educated. What about George Soros?
Yeah, George Soros throws a lot of money around. I thank you much for the telephone call. It's not convenient to bring up those names, you see, because then you can't have an intelligent argument. If you're just a propagandist, you don't want to bring that up. We were talking about President Obama and his EPA regulations, and a lot of talk about this today. Hey, some scientists, even some legitimately liberal scientists, are saying that this is a crock because they're talking about only trying to reduce temperatures by anywhere from 0.01 to 0.03 is it Celsius? Celsius. That's the scale, right? That this is absolutely useless because they say by reducing the temperature, that just slight amount by the year 2100 is just absolutely ridiculous, especially with what we're going to pay in order to do that. So he's even taking it on the chin from the other side. Also, it was revealed in the last 24 hours that environmental wackos from all over the country were invited to help draw up the policy with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington. Seems to me that that's a bit of a collusion that perhaps should raise some red flags. Meanwhile, there are some other new EPA rules coming along, and this comes from Zach Coleman writing at the Washington Examiner. Governors who refuse to comply with the Environmental Protection Agency's carbon emissions rules for power plants might get something they like even less, a cap-and-trade system imposed on their electric utilities. You either agree with the EPA or you risk allowing the more politically toxic cap-and-trade scheme to take root. The EPA can enforce a federal implementation plan. The governors who have said they won't comply, Oklahoma's Mary Fallin, Mike Pence of Indiana, Scott Walker of Wisconsin, Bobby Jindal of Louisiana, Phil Bryant of Mississippi, and a Democrat, West Virginia Governor Earl Ray Tomblin, believe the Supreme Court will strike down the rule eventually. Here's the thing. We get a lot of talk from people in government about things we are going to do. And we'll rattle the saber and claim this, but when push comes to shove, then they throw in the towel. If San Francisco can defy federal law with its sanctuary city policy, then I think a state has the same right to stand up and say, sorry, we're going to nullify this ridiculous regulation from the EPA. which, by the way, nobody votes for anyone who works at the EPA. These are just bureaucrats, unelected, foisting upon us laws that have not been drafted in the Congress, which those regulations just happen to be. The first governor who stands up and says no, and then they say, well, we're going to regulate cap and trade on your utilities. How are you going to do that? Are you going to send in troops? If I'm a governor, I'm going to reply by saying, tell you what, if you're coming down I-80, when you get to the state line, you're going to meet the National Guard and my state police. If you call out the Obama White House, you're going to find what a bunch of chicken slop people they really are. And they'll back down mightily fast if that happens. We just need people in governor's offices around the country who are finally willing to actually put their actions where their mouths happen to be. Jindal might be the one. He's got an oil-rich state. He might be the one who steps forward and says, enough is enough. Although Jindal won't do it in like rattling a saber. The way Jindal does it, he just says, well, I guess enough is enough. He's somewhat of a calm guy. You know, he's the type of guy you could be out at sea on a ship with him and be tossing and turning, and he'd be saying, so, where are we going for dinner when we get back? Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Oh, a newspaper in Idaho is savaging a local sheriff. I'd like to mention that before we wrap up today's program. It's, well, call it 20 of 10, 69. From the category of duh, there's a story today at magicvalley.com. Idaho gas prices, 7th highest in U.S. Now, why is that? Could it be that that huge gasoline tax we saw tacked on a few months ago? Maybe. And now that the state has a large surplus that it says it did not expect, could instead we actually apply that toward transportation issues and maybe cut people a little slack on that tax? Idaho's average per gallon price has dropped 4 cents in the past week to $3, but that's still 7th highest in the country, 36 cents higher than the 264 average U.S. mark. Retail prices in Idaho and the West are higher and more volatile based on shifts in supply and demand, according to AAA. It's funny because there's this huge Sinclair refinery right over in Wyoming. How does that happen? I've actually got a couple of notes on newspaper perfidy today, or perfidy, there we go. This comes from a newspaper up in the Nampa area. I get an email update from the Idaho Press Tribune every day. They're taking on a local sheriff, because, well, he doesn't like President Obama. How dare he? Because over at the newspaper, they all just love the president. Sheriffs who are technically political figures because they're elected, all right, there's your explanation, the writer says, have been known to go on politically charged rants when they get emotional. In 2011, for instance, the sheriff in Pima County, Arizona, blamed Rush Limbaugh for the shooting of Gabrielle Giffords. And, of course, the shooter had no idea who Limbaugh was. Canyon County Sheriff Karen Donahue went on his own political rant, the writer says, last week, blaming President Barack Obama for what he called an assault on law enforcement in the wake of recent officer-involved shootings. And how can we argue with that? I mean, seriously, how can we argue with that? What is of concern, the writer says, is to hear him reveal what sound like hostile attitudes towards the public's reasonable demands to hold law enforcement officers accountable for their actions. He is accountable. He gets reelected. If people don't want him there, then they won't vote for him. And the fact of the matter is, yes, President Obama and his Justice Department have created a hostile climate out there. 946. 70. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller joining us. You're on the air on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. Hey, I have a couple of points I'd like to touch on. First, I'm very guilty, like everybody else, an extreme conservative here. But we've been fighting this battle from the middle. And we can't fight an extreme from the middle. We've got to fight an extreme from the opposite extreme and then hope to find some kind of an agreement somewhere in the middle. We've been the good guys that have tried to maintain a balance and everything, but being down here trying to be nice to all of these people is not working. We've got to go to the opposite extreme, and we've got to start being as radical and as cruel and as unkind as they are in order to find the middle of this thing. And then the other issue I'd like to say is that there is a book out that's called Alaska, A Bold Land. and it talks about the ship's captain's logs that they have up there in the museum of the fur trappers that came across from Russia through that area, and there was no Prince William Sound, and the Cook Inlet was total ice, and everything was completely frozen to the point where they couldn't go any further north than just the point of Aleutian. And then the fastest retreat that that ice has ever experienced was in 100 years. It went back 1 mile per year, and that ice moved back 100 miles, and this is in the 16th century. This planet, ever since the Ice Age, has been gradually getting warmer.
Yeah, 12,000 years.
Nothing that we can do to change that, is slow it down or speed it up. And I'd ask these people on the radical side over here, where is the proof? Show us the scientific papers that are going to explain how you can determine that the human race has done anything, can do anything to ever change this one way or the other. Show us the evidence. Give us a scientific paper with all of the evidence to prove that we have done anything to alter this planet, or that we can do anything to alter this planet.
I thank you for the call, and show us the paper, and then compare and contrast that to the past, the 1600s, for instance. Why did the Thames River freeze in the 1600s? It hasn't frozen since then. We had the Little Ice Age for 500 years. Why? There were no smokestacks. There were no automobiles. Caller mentions being a conservative in the approach we have to take. Arthur Brooks has written a book called 7 Successful Habits of Conservatives. He's talking with a Real Clear Politics about one of them.
You start off with something that should be obvious but isn't, which is make a moral argument. Conservatives are always making these materialistic arguments. We sound like tax accountants for billionaires. If they start making a case for compassion and fairness like, we define it, fairness which is rewarding people for their hard work and merit no matter where they came from, treating everybody like assets as opposed to liabilities.
Aren't you glad he said assets? As President Obama treats us all like, well, it starts the same way. 9:49. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. This is, you should, if you don't buy the book, and most people won't, but Arthur Brooks, it's called The 7 Habits of Successful Conservatives. If you want to just see the synopsis, this is a segment from a much longer interview at Real Clear Politics. Go to the website, and they do a segment called Changing Lanes about once a week where they talk to someone inside the political arena. And it's 2 guys driving in a car, and they're just having a conversation about this. And Brooks actually goes through all 7 points during the conversation in the video, which would be cheaper than buying the book. Although if you buy the book, it might be a good read too. Coming up, we have Mike Gallagher, brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. And you can reach them at 736-6563. That's 736-6563. I want to thank Mike Gallagher very, very much for his time with us this morning. 9:54, Bill Colley with you, wrapping up today's edition of Top Story. God willing, the creek don't rise. I get to do it all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. It's 71. Just a quick note as a follow-up on that rant by the Press Tribune in Nampa about the Canyon County Sheriff, who, by the way, I think is rightfully spot on the mark, saying that conditions in Washington created by the president. First of all, when you go out there and you send a representative to a funeral in Ferguson, Missouri for a hoodlum who was killed by a police officer defending himself, you create the conditions that will make police officers' lives more, susceptible to being ended while they're on the street. I know that's somewhat convoluted and complex. You get my drift? You're going to create hostility toward police, and you will increase the dangers for them while they're on the job. There's a survey out I happen to see in one of the big liberal newspapers today that says 50% of black people say, especially teenagers, that they feel they've been mistreated by police. Let me tell you a quick story. They didn't go and ask these people if they were actually breaking the law, did they? They just said, have you been mistreated by police? And 50% said yes. All right, second question would be, well, were you breaking the law at the time? I was a teenager once. I know it probably seems like forever, and most people don't believe that. You think I just popped out of my mother's womb and I was a 50-year-old talk show host. But I was a teenager, and occasionally we did things around the neighborhood that, weren't really bad, but we, horseplay, and a couple of times we had run-ins with police officers. It made it worse because they all knew my dad, and that usually meant after I got chewed out by them, I was going to get it worse when I got home. But I want to stress with you, the reason I bring this up is because The fact of the matter is, I knew I did something wrong. I don't walk around today saying, those cops are mean to me. I hate anybody in a uniform and a badge. I'll get them. Of course, they're not the same cops, but this is my point that I'm making, is that I knew what I had done was wrong. And a lot of people out there seem to think that they should be able to get away with everything. 9:56, you're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yes, you're a closet racist.
I am. How's that? Hello? Why do they always... Anybody there? They just like to call up and shout, and then that's it. All I pointed out was that this kid, Michael Brown, was a criminal, a small-time hoodlum criminal in Ferguson, Missouri. I didn't say anything about the color of his skin. But I did point out that you've got black teenagers who were surveyed who all say that they've been mistreated by police, or half of them. And my question is, was there a follow-up? Did they get a follow-up question? Did anybody ask them if they did anything wrong? And then I went on to say, by the way, that when I was a teenager, I did some things that were wrong. But that's not indicting the entire Caucasian race. It's that we all do, especially when we're young, we do some stupid things. And then we grow out of it. But why is it that all of these people on the far left, these wackos who think they're monitoring the show and we'll keep him in line, and then I'm going to go marry my boyfriend. Oh. Why is it that they call up and they do this drive-by thing and they don't explain their rationale? They claim we don't want to have an intelligent debate with them, but they just call up, scream, and then they hang up. If you meet them on the street, do they turn around and run away and wet their pants? Remember, liberals, when they were kids, these were the people who ran up to you on the playground and spit at you. And then when you decked them for doing it, then they ran over and said to the playground monitor, "He's being mean to me." As if somehow spitting in somebody's face was appropriate. Just a point I want to bring up this morning. We're coming up on news at 10 o'clock. Rush Limbaugh will be along. I know that the liberals out there will enjoy that immensely. Oh, you might learn something if you listen for a while. Followed by Sean Hannity at 1 o'clock, followed by Glenn Beck at 4 o'clock, Dave Ramsey tonight, and during the overnight hours, Coast to Coast with George Norrie. Hope you all have a great day out there. And you know what? If you see some of those liberals today, ask them to have that dialogue with you and see if they'll actually engage in it. Nah, they won't.